Okay, we are now live.
Brilliant. It's my understanding that we're in the hands of our hosts. I believe.
Apologies, according to the hearing schedule, there's an opening karakia and then an introduction by the chair. And then hand it over to the mayor.
Look, I'm very happy to follow that protocol. It's not what we were told, but happy to wing it. So look, I'll tell you what, why don't I kick off and then we'll see where we land from there. So first of all, kia ora, good morning. It's great to see everybody on the screen. My sense is that as we understand it, there might be a karakia from our hosts to open the proceedings. If that's not where you've landed, we're very, very happy to open with our karakia, and then we'll go from there. I just need a nod from somebody to give me a sense, so we are respecting protocols.
I'm happy to open with a karakia, Brendan.
Fantastic.
A ka marama tākiri ko te ata, korihi ko te manu, he manu kōrori, he manu kōrora. Kōrero tia mai no tua whakarere ko te hau i ahau mai hei tō mai rangi ko te ata whai. Rongo whakairihia ki runga i paupau, ko rangi ki runga ko papa ki raru i kākuhu tia ko te pō ko te whānau marama. Anau mai e te auharira e te pō, tuturu o whiti whakamaua kia tina, haumie, huie, tai kia. Kia ora, Brendan.
Kia ora, James. Thank you for the karakia, and I'm going to just introduce the commission now so we get a sense of who's on the screen, and then I'm going to ask Commissioner Bigham to respond with a couple of opening observations. So just to give a sense, on the screen from the commission there are two fellow commissioners, Commissioner Piper and Commissioner Bigham, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Piper just to introduce herself first.
E te Marie, kia ora koutou. I'm Sue Piper. I'm a Wellingtonian, and I've been participated in various roles in the Local Government Commission for the last 25 years plus. It's good to be with you.
Thank you, Sue. I'll introduce myself before we go to Commissioner Bigham. So I'm Brendan Duffy, the chair of the commission. Some 21 years in local government, 12 years as mayor of the Horowhenua District Council, and some roles on National Council as well. Also on the screen from the commission, you'll see Donald Reesabos, Linda Canton, and Penny Langley. They're the advisory team that keep us commissioners in order. We as the commissioners have to make the decisions, but technically we're advised by our team, and there's a long-standing history and knowledge that those three people bring to our team. And so I'm just going to go to Commissioner Bigham for her introduction, and then we'll go into we'll pass to your side for your introductions, Ms. Stoltz.
Atamari koutou, tinara koutou, ngā iwi whānui o tērā atu taho o te motu. Nōku te tino honore i tēnei ata, hei kōrero māngai mō tēnei te komeni hana, kia koutou, ngā iwi o te taira whiti ara ko Ngaita Manuhere, Ngāti Porou, Rongo Whakaata, me te aitanga māhiki, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia koe hoki rehet me o kaimahi, me o kaikaunihira o tēnā rohe, o Turanganui a Kiwa, tēnā koutou. He uri au no Taranaki Maunga, I noho ana au ki Taranaki ki te tonga, he uri no Ngāru hini me tia awa iwi, tēnei ata, kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi. Whakaaro tonu au hoki ki te hoa rangatira o taku tuakana, e takoto I te urupā ki Muriwai, ki tāku nei mohi o ko te ingoa o tērā urupā ko whā kore tia, ko Lee mā te ao tērā, ara nā te whānau mai nā nō reira. e takutua kana takoto tonu. Nō reira, huri noa te motu, ahakoa nohea, ahakoa kōwai, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody, my honour and privilege to be the voice for our commission this morning, and greeting you all, and from the windy west coast to the sunny east coast, noi te mihi atu kia koutou. I'm Bonita Bigham. I am a current community board member in the Taranaki Coastal Community Board for the South Taranaki District Council, and a former 3-term district councillor for Aotearoa, and currently also chair Te Maruata, which is the national collective of Māori in governance for our local government sector. So it's my honour and privilege to be with you all this morning. And yeah, every time I pass through that way, I always got to stop and see my bro-in-law and climb the hill, because he's at the top of that hill in that urupa. But always got a special place in my heart. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Benita. So Ms. Stoltz, we're going to pass over to you now for your introductions and essentially introducing the team and then proceeding straight in to your presentation. So we're in your hands.
Well, kia ora, he tino mahana ki tēnei hui, ngā mihi kia koutou katoa, nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. It is lovely to be able to speak to you today. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for taking the time. I know you have so many hearings that you have to attend, especially in these COVID times. It's not easy because you cannot really come and see us face to face, which would be our first preference, and I know your first preference as well. My name is Gisborne Stoltz. For those that don't know me, I am the Mayor at the Gisborne District Council, and I have our CEO Nadine Thatcher-Swan here with me today, and I'm also supported by James Beatty from the Gisborne District Council. As you can see in Tairāwhiti, we arrive in numbers, so it's a lovely privilege also to have our iwi partners here with us today. And I will leave it up to them to introduce themselves. So I am going to pass over before I start, just so that everyone knows who is here, give our iwi partners the opportunity to introduce themselves, and then I will get cracking. So Stacey, I'm going to hand over to you, and then you can nominate someone else, and then we can get our Tairāwhiti team to introduce themselves.
Morena, thank you, Rahit. Morena tatou, my name is Stacey here. I am the chair for the Rongo Whakaata Iwi Trust. We also come in numbers. It's really important that the fabric of our community is here observing and hearing the discussion that's going to be put in front of us today. So I'm going to hand it over quite quickly to the other two screens that are in front of you to introduce who they are as part of the Rongo Whakaata contingent in this conversation this morning.
Morena tātai, i te whānau, ko Petra hawhi tēnei, he uri no te Tairāwhiti te whānui, i te puaki au no roto Rongo Whakaata, Corporate Services Manager, Rongo Whakaata Iwi Trust.
Kia ora tātai. Ngā mihi mahana kia koutou katoa, ko au, Elena Nepe, the chair of the Rongo Whakaata Kāhui Kaumātua, and I just want to say I'm here to support our trustees. Kia ora.
Ti hei uri, ti hei nokona ko te mai reora ki te whaia, ki te ao marama, ki ana rea rena te pōkuri tōku ingoa. He mawainga tēnei no ngai ui whenua o te Tairāwhiti, o te rā ko Rongo Whakaata, tēnei mihi atu nei. Tēnei ka mihi ki api whanainga, Papa Sharon, Uncle Tama, Auntie Stace, Mātua Pene, katoa, ngā mana whenua, tēnā tātou katoa.
Morena koutou, ko Moira Brown taki no Koahau, the Deputy Chair no Rongo Whakaata Iwi Trust. Mihi ana kia koutou, kia koe tama.
Morena tātou, morena koutou, wai au, manawaru te maunga, te arai te awa, rua pani Rongo Whakaata Ngāti Porou Kuiwi, tamawai para tōku ingoa. I'm the co-deputy chair of Rongo Whakaata Iwi Trust. Kia ora.
Morena koutou, ko Pehimana Hapu Brown, taku ingo, ko Penny Brown. Ko mga haumi te maunga, ko Waipawa te awa, ko te aitanga mahaki te iwi. Kia ora.
Selwyn.
Kia ora tātou. Tēnā hoki ki tō tātou kaihari te karakia ha ko tō muri I te tomokanga mai, e mihi ana ki tō tātou karakia I whakatūwhera tēnei huihuinga. Tangihi o tātou mate e hika ma, e kore ārika tēnā me te mate I roto I a tātou o tira holapa ki te motu. No reira o tātou mate rātou kia rātou, tātou te hunga ora. E tau nei I runga I tēnei paonga, tēnei ipurangi a te rangi tāwaia, tēnā koutou kia ora tātou katoa. Selwyn parata tēnei, wau te tia mana o te runanga nui o Ngāti Porou, e hono nei I runga I te kaupapa o tēnei rā. E mihi ana kia kutuākana taina, o te itanga mahaki I rongo whakata, me ngai tā manuhiri. O tira tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Good, thank you for that. I didn't miss anyone. So please bear with me. I am now going to share my screen. Maybe just get sorted. Share screen. Let's see. How do I get it on? Presenters one. There we go. Okay, can everyone see that? Good morning and thank you for all the introductions. Kia ora and thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today about our Tairāwhiti representation proposal and the processes we followed to arrive at our final proposal. Council has been on a journey with our community, reflecting what representation means for Tairāwhiti and how we can assure that all voices are heard. As you will see in my presentation, as a council, we followed a robust process, and this is reflected in the large number of submissions we received, as well as our community engagement results. This has not been an easy journey, as we know that each resident has unique and valid connections to their special part of Tairāwhiti, and incorporating that into a workable local central government legally compliant model is near impossible. But we did try our best. We do acknowledge that our proposal is not perfect. We understand that the final proposal may not go far enough in terms of Māori representation, but with the current legislative limitations, we have done our very best, and we do believe it's a step in the right direction. So let's go. I just have a few slides, so I won't bore you to death. I just have a few slides showing you the process we have followed. I know our commission have received these, so I will just quickly walk you through 5 to 10 minutes max on the process we followed to get to our final presentation and our final proposal. So if you take a look at this slide, as a council, we have changed quite a bit since we came into power in 2019. So on the 13th of August 2020, we changed our voting system, which I do know that people sometimes look at single transferable vote because it's such a complex system behind the scene that sometimes first past the post makes more sense. But when we look at the data, we all know that single transferable vote is more representative and a fairer way of voting. So as a council, we adopted the single transferable vote in August 2020. So that was the first step that we took. Then between August and November in 2020, we started consultation in our community in regards to Māori wards. And as you can see, 275 submissions were received. And 67.6% of them were in favour of establishing Māori wards. So at the end of the year, or closer to the end of the year, we then had a unanimous vote in council, and we're proud to introduce Māori wards in this local government system. So, and that was not challenged, and that then kicked off a representation review for us. As you will know, once you introduce Māori wards, that automatically triggers a representation review. So we did a representation review in 2019, and usually you can wait 6 years before you revisit. But because we introduced Māori wards, we had to relook at how we have our wards structured. So then we moved on to our pre-consultation period. So this was for us to go out to our community before we decide what we want to do to get guidance. We had 25 community meetings and hui a iwi. So we did try to get out and about. That was the time when quite a few of our meetings were online. As you can see, it was in that time when we were in lockdown, but we did try, or some part of that was in lockdown, we did try to have some face-to-face meetings as well. We received good responses online. So that could give us some kind of indication on what our community were thinking. So in August in 2021, we moved on to our initial proposal, which had 2 wards proposed. So the one ward was a district-wide, a Tairāwhiti-wide general ward, and our next ward was a district-wide Māori ward. So as part of that process, we then had to take out our initial proposal to our community. And once we put it out to our community, we received 1,150 submissions. We had to have a hearing. We listened to several of our community who told us if they agreed or disagreed. And I know the Commission have that information, is that our community, our rural community especially, came out and said, we feel like we're losing our voice. Can you take a look and incorporate a rural ward? So as you would see at this stage, and I'll get to it soon, at this stage we have several smaller wards, and what we were proposing is a move just to 2 big at-large wards. So in November of last year, we then adopted our 3-ward system, which still had a district-wide Māori ward, which anonymously councillors supported. And then we had quite robust discussions. I'm sure that the commissioners have seen our recordings. We spent hours and hours debating which we think would be the best system of representation for our general ward. Like I said, it was not easy. Both proposals that we spoke, our initial proposal, our final proposal, both have great merit and both have their flaws as well. So at the end of the day, we had a robust discussion and we decided on our final proposal, which I'll show to you soon. But before we move to our final proposal, I just want to let you know what we currently have, and then I can show you what we are proposing. So just for clarity, once we passed our final proposal, the decision was then taken out of our hands and handed over to you, our local government commission, who makes the final decisions. So what we as a council can say, we are proud that we are introducing Māori wards. We are proud that we followed a process that was robust, try to include as many in our community as possible. At the end of the day, we had to make decisions, and this is what we feel is a good move in the right direction. So I just quickly want to show you what we currently have. So at this stage, we have the mayor elected at large throughout the whole of Tairāwhiti. Then we have 1 city ward with 9 councillors elected in that ward. And at this stage, we have 4 rural wards, 2 to the north and 2 to the west. We do not have Māori wards at this stage. We also don't have any community boards. So I'll just show you what we have landed on in the end. So what council have decided is that we will elect a mayor at large, has always been the case. We will have our Taurāwhiti Māori ward, one district-wide Māori ward, where 5 councillors will be elected from the Māori electoral roll. Then we will have the Turanganui City General Ward, where 6 councillors will be elected from that role. And we will have the Tairāwhiti Rural General Ward, where 2 councillors will be elected from there. We also went out to our community, spoke about community boards, and as you can see from the feedback, it is something that we are not currently looking at introducing, and also our community agree with that. That is not something that they at this stage want to incorporate in our system of wards. So this is just a quick overview of the process we followed, the timeline we followed, how we engaged with our community, how we engaged with our iwi partners. And I'm sure you will have questions in regards of consultation and processes followed. I'm more than happy to answer those. I'm all open now to some questions. I will stop sharing so we can see each other's faces again. But this is me just walking through the simple process we followed, and I'm more than happy to answer questions now or later. I'm in your hands. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you, Mayor Stoltz. Look, the process is that the commissioners now will take the opportunity to ask questions, and then when we've exhausted ourselves on the questions, we'll go through and take the observations from the appellants. So just for the next few moments, we'll just let the commissioners engage as they see fit or wish, and I'm just checking to see. So while I'm waiting to get, oh yep, we've got a nod going already, goodness me. So Commissioner Bigham and then Commissioner Piper, and then I'll chime in after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora, Mayor Stoltz. Thank you for that presentation. Just coming back to the community boards question, you mentioned very briefly that community boards were considered, but the community has decided not to go that way. Can you just expand a bit more on what consultation was done, what information was shared to the community about the potential for community boards? I just think it's interesting that, you know, there could have been more elected members with a greater representation across the rural sector with the establishment of community boards. So just interested to dig a bit deeper into that conversation, please.
So there are 2 parts to that. So originally, and James might be able to share more light on the actual consultation that went on in regards to all the information that was given to our community way back. But if I can talk just from when we started talking to our community this time around in regards to community boards, councillors were talking to our community already about quite a few changes from where we started off in the beginning of this term, introducing STV, introducing Māori wards, possibly having voting at large. And feedback we did receive from our community is that they felt too much change happening, and that will just add another layer of bureaucracy in an area where there are already a lot of change happening. So if you take a look at the feedback we have received, is that community members felt this time around no. But I also wanted to say originally in 2019, there was discussions and we were looking possibly at having community boards way back then. And that is when we were looking at introducing voting at large. But you might ask what changed since then? And it is that we are introducing Māori wards. So way back as well, there was a feeling that our Māori voice were missing in those big voting areas that we were introducing. And that was a layer that we could add to assure that. So this time around, we did feel that we are introducing Māori wards as well. So that was one of the reasons we decided, aside from community feedback as well, that was addressed that way. But I'm not sure if James want to add anything in regards to the actual consultation that happened.
Yes, I'm happy to speak to that. Thank you, Your Worship. You've done actually a good job of summarising it. So I think what's a salient point to consider is that our consultation on the initial proposal, including our pre-engagement, come after the decision to introduce Māori wards. So as distinct from our last representation review where we didn't have Māori wards in play, there was a sentiment in the community that community boards could be an opportunity to bring Māori voice to the table, not just Māori voice, but more succinct community voice. But this side of the Māori wards decision, I think our community's been very clear throughout the 3 stages of the process that community boards would be, as the Mayor has put it, an additional layer of bureaucracy, that what we've achieved through the introduction of Māori wards in some way goes towards achieving, I guess, part of what we were hoping to achieve in the last representation review with the introduction of community boards. So I think the people have spoken on that. It's been pretty clear and consistent right the way through our comprehensive consultation process.
Kia ora kōrua, thank you.
Kia ora.
So my question, my question, Ms. Stoltz, is specifically around the rural area. So what is, just help me to understand what's changed, other than the Māori wards, obviously get that, but what's changed in terms of what was resolved in 2019 for rural representation to what is proposed this time? Can you give me a sense of, you know, how's it going to work? I'm struggling with it. I'm struggling with what's proposed and I need to try and get my head around it.
So there are 2 steps to that, and you mentioned it earlier. So as a council, we decided 13 councillors is a good number to represent a unitary authority. So we're sticking to our 13 numbers. When we introduced Māori wards, that means you do have 5 councillors now elected at large. So we're looking at the 8. So that's the 8 we are talking about. At this stage, what we are proposing is 6 that will be elected in our city. So you are asking about the 2. So as a council, and you will see in the debate we had, is we spoke a lot about why do we feel, so what have changed? So we've always had rural wards. So as you can see, we now have 4 rural wards. So we have moved a lot in the last few years. When we put forward our initial proposal to have at-large wards, our rural community, which in our rural community are made of farmers, people that live in our townships. We have quite unique features up our East Coast and the West Coast, and our iwi partners can speak better to that than I can. But what we said is that feedback was our rural community really would value having that rural voice retained. So retaining the rural voice is not simple because it is such a huge area that we are proposing. But we are proposing 2 councillors for that area. So you might ask how that would be done. So first of all, I would like to speak just from my own personal perspective of how I would imagine that rural voice still being around the table. So when I travel up and down the coast and go and meet with our communities, one thing they often would say is, please do not take our local councillor away from us. And I'm sure around the country, everywhere, that is what we hear. People love the fact that there's someone that live in their community, that know about their roads, that know about culverts, stuff that sometimes city councillors might not know. So when we started looking at how our region would look, and to be compliant, because as you know, we walk the finest of line when it comes to what we want and how we make sure it is legally acceptable for the government and for us in order to have fair representation. So what we were looking at is effective representation. So fair, we are ticking those boxes, but effective. So once we started talking to our rural community, they were well aware that what we were proposing was quite a huge rural area, which might mean someone might not live in your township, or someone might not live 30 kilometers away from you. But what we as a council heard from our rural community is that they would love to have that rural voice around the table. It is people with a lived experience, someone that live in areas that might be 85 kilometers outside of Gisborne in a rural road. So it might not be someone that lived just in your township or around the corner, as we have now with 4 rural councillors in those designated rural areas. But what we as a council said, that if 2 people are elected out of that big rural area, people that live there and have that lived experience, they can then bring that voice to be around the table. So like I said, it is not a perfect proposal that we are putting forward, but we really debated this in and out, and you can see that from the videos links you have received. What we thought is, it won't be possible just with 2 councillors to have the current service that we have, where each councillor live in a ward. But what we can assure is having 2 elected members elected from the rural area, and that bring that rural lived experience to our council table. And obviously, as a unitary authority, we expect our city councillors to also be involved in our rural areas. So it is not like we are just expecting 2 councillors to work outside the city and the rest of the councillors just cover our city area. So there would be shared responsibilities, but what councillors felt is that by having those 2 people elected from that big rural area will bring that rural lived experience to our decision-making table. So that is the justification we followed.
Okay. Might come back, and I'll just go to Commissioner Piper.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mayor Stotts. Can we just stay with that question, if it's okay, Chair? If you weren't constrained by the compliance requirements of the Act, how many rural councillors do you think you might have thought would be helpful? Well, no, sorry, I've loaded that. Can I ask the question again, a bit more neutrally? Given the restraints of the legislation and the council's very deep efforts to meet it, if you weren't restrained by that, what decision or decisions might have the council considered?
So from 1989, our council have always had city and rural wards. So that is what we know. That is how our large geographical area has been cut up in the past. So as we have moved, I think in 2013, 2 of our rural wards were put together because, you know, numbers in our rural areas are declining and the numbers in the city are growing. So as a council, obviously, we looked at wards that are compliant. So our staff in the beginning, we did ask questions. Can we have, say, our northern ward, 1 rural ward, our western ward, 1 rural ward, where there might be 2 councillors in there, 2 councillors up there, like we have now. But unfortunately, the numbers don't stack up. And I know we have to tick the fair and the effective boxes, because otherwise the vote of 1 person might carry way more weight than another person. So we didn't in detail go into non-compliant options, because we do know that in the end of the day, we are striving to do it as perfectly as possible and as compliant as possible. But I do note that the Commission last time broke the +10 minors rule with our Matakawa ward right in the north. So I know you have more flexibility than we have. We try to offer up a system that we walked through with our community. And like I said before, it is both options have the advantages and disadvantages. But in the end, we had to settle or settled for an option that is compliant, but it does have some issues there.
Did you give, what if any regard did you give to the isolated communities criteria?
As always, we do give regard to those, you know, we've always dealt with isolated communities like the Matakawa ward. So in all our considerations, we took that into account. But like I said, trying to then get that into a compliant model, you have to weigh up a different consideration. So we did take that into account as we walked through our system. And I can assure you that the discussions were quite lively.
Okay. Just the effective representation review is a two-way street in many ways. There's the voice at the council table, and then there's the access to the councillor by residents. What do you think the challenges, are there any challenges in that area? Having two councillors from the rural ward, which is now all of the rural part. Or what are those challenges, and what plans has the council got to help?
Well, so we're a huge region, and we've always accommodated for that. And we have State Highway 35 going up the East Coast. So if you're a councillor or someone, it can take you 3.5 hours to get to the north of that. If you have to carry on to our west on State Highway 2, it might be an 1.5 hours drive. So our councillors are well aware of those limitations. So as a council, we've always supported our rural councillors with travel allowances. We also go out as a whole council into our community. So we would have cuppers, we call it a council cuppa. We would go to Matawai or Murawai up to Ruatoria. So we also as a council try not to have everything city-based, but you know how it works. Usually when most things are concentrated in an area, that is where most action happens. So it is a huge area to cover with Zoom. And like I said earlier, when I spoke to Bonita's question, is councillors were well aware when this proposal were put forward that it might not be someone living right in your township like we have now, where we have 2 councillors living up the East Coast or 2 councillors living in the Western Ward. But at least it would be coming to the council table, someone with that lived experience bringing that information, and the whole of council then supporting those rurally elected councillors, but also us taking responsibility for our whole region, as we always do, but more so because we can see it is a big area that we are proposing in order to be compliant.
Now, Radio New Zealand keeps me informed when State Highway 2 or State Highway 35 falls over. Often, I mean, given the weather, climate changes. What's the internet? What's the telecommunications? Are there any challenges for either of the western or the northern part of the district? And what, if so, what are they?
Like all rural areas, there would be issues, say, with State Highway 2, State Highway 35. Often we might have a tree or a slip that have come down, or stop-start signs. And those are the exact lived experience where people that live in that area know about and could affect someone's ability to maybe meet up with someone face-to-face. You know, in these times, we do hope that you know, with Zoom or with phone, you can work around it a bit, but still there are limitations when you start moving into huge rural areas, stuff that our rural councillors are well aware of and they've worked with in the past.
Yeah, and so there's technological problems with roads and the computer. This is my last question in this area. And what about, but the other impediment is often income. So is there, I mean, is there way, what kinds of ways does council help people that live in the rural areas to stay in contact with the council, and particularly, of course, in this case, councillors? You know, you need certain gear.
Yeah. So at this stage, it is not like we have citizen-sponsored, say, internet or anything like that. But what we do try as a council, we have council offices in Te Puia Springs. We have our like in Tokomare Bay, we have a councillor there, and not a councillor, in Tokomare Bay, we have a liaison officer there to try and make it council officers and councillors accessible to our community. Our community also reach out to us quite a bit via Facebook and all the normal communication channels. So I do acknowledge and recognise living in rural areas brings with it some issues, but I can see my CEO putting her hand up, so I'll pass over to Nadine. She will have something to add. Thank you, Nadine.
Thank you. Sorry, it was just in response to one of the previous questions around the Matakawa Waiapu ward, and in particular the connection that the communities may have there. I just wanted to support our mayor just in terms of the decision making that they went through around when the council locked in the decision around Māori wards, that then constrained a bit around what you could do to give fair and effective representation in some of the other areas by sheer numbers. But I want to point out, though, in terms of that area, and particularly around the East Coast, as you would have seen in the reports that were provided, that area is predominantly comprises our whānau, our Māori whānau, iwi, and the majority are on the Māori electoral roll as well. So that does, in some ways, give a link to some form of fair and effective representation for the rural communities there. And then the second part coming in when the councillors decided to have two rural representatives was another form to try and give effect to that closeness as much as they could.
Okay, Nadine, thank you for that observation that you've just made. And Ms. Stoltz, I know we're drilling pretty hard and you've got to answer them all, but I'm just going to give a bit of a qualification around this. This is not about us particularly concerning ourselves about rural farmers, for example. We're looking at rural community. And I was hoping somewhere in there was going to be some commentary around the value of the Maori wards and understanding what that role is. And I know I have to ask a question. I'll somehow get to it, but I'm so pleased you've actually identified from your CEO's perspective. So my question is, to help me understand and get myself out of trouble, what is the expectation of Maori ward representatives?
Well, it is the same as any councillor, as you know. Councillors are there, so our Māori ward elected councillors will support our rural councillors, will work alongside our city councillors. All one, everyone signs the same oath. So as a Māori ward councillor, you are expected to represent everyone.
Thank you. It's just interesting that we it's not interesting. I think it's important we understand that perspective as well. Now, one thing that's really, really important is there are a number of representatives here that I think we need to somehow open up engagement with.
But just before we do that, a very quick request for the right of reply. It's Sue here, Sue Piper. Yeah. I haven't, not from Tiki Tiki, I might say. The ratio of general electorate and Māori electorate for the rural area, CEO just referred to that, and I can't find the figure. I'd be grateful if you split it into the current wards. I'd be grateful for those figures. Doesn't have to be right of reply. You can flick it to Linda. Am I being clear? Yeah, thank you. That's all.
Okay, so two things. So James wishes to say something, and I am keen for iwi partners to comment in this space before we go to our appellants, if there's a desire to do that. So James.
Sorry, and I might be speaking to something that's already well known, but I just didn't want it to be lost on us that in the current final proposal, there's every opportunity and every chance that we could end up with Māori representation that lives rurally. In fact, at the far extreme, we could end up with 5 people, but that's a matter for the election and the election result.
Okay, thank you. So Ms. Stoltz, so I'm just checking in. You've got iwi partners on that are in support here, and I just want to check and be respectful to ensure that those opportunities are offered for. If there's anyone that wishes to take the opportunity to comment. Thanks, Penny Brown. Yep, sure, Penny.
Yes, I wouldn't mind a comment, but I'll go after Stacey. I've noticed Stacey's hand's been up for a little while. Tēnā koe, Stacey.
Oh, my apologies. Good, Stacey.
Thank you, Penny, ever the gentleman. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting topic of conversation, and one that, if I can provide some context on the perspective that we come from as rongo whakaata. So we are essentially, in terms of our geographic footprint in Tairāwhiti, we're from Te Kōwhai at Te Whero Lagoon inland to the Arai headwaters, which is where the entire town supply for the region comes from. We continue to Te Reinga in the southwest and north, past Kaiati, through to Wainui, out to Pauawa. Our iwi has over 6,000 members, of which 40% live in the Gisborne District Council area. So our home-based interest as a mana whenua grouping is quite different to what most other iwi are currently experiencing around the impact of urban drift through the 80s. We have played a significant role around the history and national identity of this country, having been the first place for the arrival of Captain James Cook, as we all know. So our conversation about having constant change, that's not our laws, is not a new position for us. If I can think about where the Mayor was referring to in the 80s, where this is something that's become very common, I think, for the region. So the abrupt nature of change is something really hard for the community to come to grips with. In 1840, we had 22 chiefs sign the Treaty of Waitangi on behalf of Tūranga, and up until 1865, rongo whakaata and our Tūranga whanaunga retain control of our entire affairs across our geographic region. So our history around this conversation spans back to then. During the submissions of 2018 to 2028 long-term plan, we entered into an enduring relationship with the council, which is a bilateral agreement. We wanted to explore what partnership feels and looks like. And that was about also giving effect to the mana whenua that we have, albeit rather slowly. We know that this is a journey towards a solution and not the solution itself. But the rural ward component is one that's of particular interest to us, because as a iwi that has urban, industrial, horticultural, pastoral farming areas and lowland water bodies, and as a young Māori woman who grew up in a rural community in Gisborne, namely between Manutuki and Muriwai, the population, I think, is something that I'd be interested in understanding around what the Māori population is versus the non-Māori population in those rural areas, as we're determining it as part of this conversation, to understand what that does mean as it relates to the general ward in its entirety, and the Māori district ward, and then the rural ward, and how that is reflective of the population base. Because we're looking at two population-based type representation models with an aspect of place-based. And as an iwi that has a footprint, urban, rural, all of the above, where the city's been built on our tribal lands, we have to be both. So having to have lived people through their rural lives be also in a position where they get a view over and above what a district-wide approach is for Māori is something that I am really trying to understand around the equitable nature of how representation, particularly for the rural Māori communities, is there based on whatever the success experiences around engagement of rural councillors with their Māori communities to date. And that's engagement in the most basic level with the Māori communities and around the fabric of rural Māori communities, which are a large chunk of the region. So most of the Māori freehold land in the Tairāwhiti region is rurally based. So that's Māori as ratepayers on Māori land, Māori as a community of interest. There's also Māori ratepayers on general land in rural areas, and then we tend to, on occasion, pigeonhole Māori as mana whenua in rural areas as well. So I just think it's It's something I would hope that this panel considers quite comprehensively in terms of the impact around how this allocation of representation really does somewhat disenfranchise the iwi voice and the Māori conversation further.
Thank you, Stacey. Now, Penny, you so just so I'm organised here. You're also seeking the opportunity as an appellant. Have I got that correct? You're speaking as an appellant as well.
That's right. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. You have some observations though as an iwi partner first.
And Stacey has covered off a number of those, and that was just to talk to yourself and Sue, and a little bit to Bonita about community of interest. We have other ways of recognising our communities of interest, and I did need to support the council. The council doesn't need a person in a designated area to get to its rural residents. It does an excellent job at the moment, and it will carry on whether there's a person out there. And yes, when I get to my chance to talk, you'll see that I've been against rural wards right from the start. Thank you, Brendan.
Cheers, Penny. Thank you. Now, just Bonita, you've got your hand up.
Kia ora. Thank you, Brendan. Tēnā koe, Stacey. Ngā mihi nui kia koe, i hoa. Just when you were having your kōrero, you talked about looking at population. Can I just clarify if you're meaning the whole Māori population or the Māori electoral population figures that a lot of we're talking about is determined on, unfortunately?
I think it's about the and then the area of which we're talking about, the rural community voice that came through quite strong through the engagements, and what that rural community voice is in fact as it relates to the population base of that rural community, and whether or not that has, as part of the process being led by council, been factored in around wanting to hold and establish specific rural seats alongside Māori ward seats. So there's the Māori population in Gisborne, there's the Māori population on the Māori roll, and then there's the electoral roll, and then there's the Māori population of those communities and those rural areas, and then there's the findings from the process that the council has now put forward that's contributed to the new model proposed. So what is the Māori population in those rural communities that have come through that also reflect the position around where we've come to on this final model that was never presented up front?
Ka pai. Kia ora rā.
Okay, so Selwyn, keen to hear from you, and then what we'll do is we'll go back to Penny for your position as an appellant. Selwyn, kia ora.
Kia ora, everybody. First of all, Ngāti Pro supported the initial proposal in our submission of September 2021. Mayor and 8 General, 5 Māori, all at large. At large, councillors must represent everyone regardless, which is an important principle for us. Ngāti Pro therefore consider that the single at-large general and single at-large Māori wards allows for the strongest representation for Ngāti Pro under the current law. Therefore, we don't support GD's subsequent change to include a rural ward with 2 seats. Eventually, Ngāti Pro would like to see a change that allows for iwi seats, but accept that this would require a law change.
Kia ora, Selwyn. Thank you for those very clear and succinct observations. We're going to try and get back to the schedule a little bit. Penny, very keen to have your observations as an appellant, and for commissioners, if you go to page 61, and I must say, which I should have observed right at the very, very start, doing this, and Mayor Stoltz, you did make a comment about it, doing this stuff virtually, it's not easy, and for everybody involved. So I do apologise if there's a little bit of a glitch as we go along. If commissioners have got their heads down, they haven't fallen asleep, we're trying to take notes, just so you know. And the other observation that I will make, COVID has not helped across New Zealand for local authorities engaging with their communities. And you're no different to anybody else in that space. And we've made that acknowledgement as we've gone around the country, as we've zoomed around the country through this process. So I'll just put that on the record as well. So, Penny, we're in your hands.
Thank you very much, Brendan, and tēnā koe to yourself as chair of the local government commissioning body that we're talking to today. First, I want to acknowledge the small step changes that have happened, and Mayor Riet's slides showed that very well. And I guess the first one was the moving through with the STV. And I must just say at this stage too, STV has been in the hospital board for maybe 2 periods of elections now, and it has not disadvantaged our community in any way. The boards that have been representative there haven't been disadvantaged by not having a ward system. So we have that example of something that's worked successfully. The next step change I want to acknowledge is the getting through the Māori wards full stop. And that was excellent by this council and previous councils to date as well. The opportunity that is in front of us, and we must acknowledge Wairoa and all the hard work it's done and where it is today, and of course that's James who we have with us. But the opportunity in front of you three is that this is one of the most significant representational reviews that you'll be doing because of the numbers. At the moment, you're seeing 1s and 2s, and a lot of your review is just accepting that one more person is going to be added to a body of anything between 11 to 15. And so the impact of that one person is not going to meet the aspirations of the Māori constituents in other areas. But in our area, it is a significant number, whether we set on 4 or 5. And there is an opportunity for real purposeful change. And I'm hoping that the commissioners see that. One of the reasons, the other little step change is as Selwyn said, we had good consultation, good processes, and we got to a point where an agreement was no community boards of interest or communities of interest, because a lot of us are those already as our iwi, hapu and whānau groups. A lot of us are doing things in the community already, and we don't need the council to go into there and do what we're doing village by village. We have good representation and meet all the needs of our community, so we didn't see the need for other community boards, such as what you're perhaps experiencing with your review in Hamilton and that. So we're quite happy to move with a council model of outside of the mayor, the number of 8 and 5. Now, the reason why I've been the strongest out of most of the iwi groups about retaining only the 2 at-large wards is because our ability to influence is, yes, firstly, in the Māori ward and putting up the calibre of candidates in that Māori ward across the whole region, and not only putting up good calibre candidates, but encouraging people to vote. Now, if we're going to go to all that trouble in the Māori ward, then why wouldn't we do similar in the general ward? And so we see the impact of doing a good job in the Māori ward and then slipping over into the general ward and presenting the same kaupapa principles on how we will choose our candidates and what they will do to represent their Māori ward, and then trying to build up a groundswell for the Māori that are in the general ward and choose to be in the general ward. So it's a 2-pronged strategy to increase the participation. And the difficulty I have with the rural wards is that it dampens the effect of that. I don't know if I'm going to have enough, if I want to work a election strategy in the rural wards, because it's very narrow, whereas before in the at-large ward, we would get good engagement across a wider group of people. so that's where I believe that some of the step change is what you're facing. Once again, I say the opportunity to make meaningful change to one of the few boards, one of the few councils throughout New Zealand to have an elected Māori representation at the table that doesn't do away with the opportunity for mana whenua, tangata whenua, to have relationships with council and that elected body as well.
Thank you,
I
Penny.
think that's practically where I should stop as well, Brendan, because we've had a very good morning with you. Yep.
Thank you for those observations. I just need to check. Doug, I'll come to you in a minute if that's okay. I'll just, yep, thank you. Just check with commissioners, is there any particular questions that you would like to ask of Penny based on his observations? Sure, Commissioner Piper.
Tēnā koe, Koro. That was very helpful. Can I just go to the dear? Oh no, I can find that out later. No, thank you for that. That was very helpful. As was Stacey. Kia ora, Stacey.
Commissioner Bigham. Oh, sorry, Penny. Yeah, Penny first.
If I can just to Commissioner Piper, the one of Stacey's points was that every morning in Gisborne, you will at 5 o'clock in the morning, you'll see a number of cars leaving town, and they are our people going to work in rural areas. And some of our people will travel 3 hours to get to their work, and then later that evening they come back into town. And the other point that Stacey made is that we are owners in big Māori land blocks. So not only do we have some of us will be paying rent in Gisborne where rates are taken out of, but our land blocks out in the rural areas are being taxed as well. So yes, putting Māori in one part and not the other doesn't work for us. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Bigham.
Oh, tēnā koe te matua. Thank you for that clarification. That really helps solidify my thinking around the need or not for community boards. So I appreciate that. And as soon as you were talking, it was like, oh, of course, we do it all over the motu. Why would it be any different in Te Tai Rāwhiti? Ngā mihi nui kia koe. Just wanting to explore some of your kōrero around the STV voting system and wanting to know if you see any potential challenges for, especially the rural wards, when you're talking about potential for issues being there, having Māori representation. What sort of challenges might STV pose in that situation and that you've described with the rural wards? Are there any challenges?
I think there are opportunities. If we stay with a Gisborne ward at large, there are people who will stand in there who will be from a rural background. And I'm saying that not only will we have our kaupapas crossover Māori candidates, but also some of the European candidates in the general ward will think along the same way as we do, with Three Waters and the Ngāhere and a number of issues like that. And I'm hoping that that introduction of relationships being built is something that's never been, has never existed in previous council elections. It's always been the biggest bully will win, so to speak. You just go for the numbers at any cost. And the idea is to try and create some sort of rhythm and pattern with relationships in your own ward, and then within the other ward with Māori who are on the general ward, and then with the European candidates in the general ward as well.
Ka pai, kia ora. So it's about getting the right candidates and making sure they get up there and our people participate, get the result. Kia ora rā, tēnā koe.
So maybe, Penny, I'm just going to round it out because it's really, really important kōrero that's going down at the moment. So in your view, if the general ward is 8, no rural ward, and we have the Māori ward of 5, you are comfortable that fair and effective representation is available, will be available to the broadest outposts of your community?
Yes, Brendan. And the group you're talking to here this morning have the background from working with COVID to make me say with confidence that we can push the appropriate people right out to the far reaches of our motu to meet their needs. Yes.
Thank you. Fantastic. Now, just bear with me. Just to give you a sense, there's two computer screens, there's a cell phone, and there's text messages coming in left, right, and centre. So suffer me while I now read a piece of paper. Is Manu here, Penny? Just help me.
Yes, Manu is here.
Am I blind or can?
No, I'll bring Manu through now.
Oh, sorry. Okay, right. That makes more sense. Can I go? Hold on. Where's the screen? Can I go back to Doug? My apologies, Doug. Can I just ask you? Can I first of all say I apologise for not recognising you earlier, but you've come on through the proceedings here, and I'd just like to pass to you for a comment you might wish to make.
Tēnā te mihi kia koe, Brendan, and apologies everybody for lateness. A number of people down with COVID, so we'll blame COVID again. Just in summary, from a Ngāi Manihiri point of view, we support the notion of Māori wards, and at the time of conversations, the proposal was for at least five members of the Māori ward. From a Ngāi Manihiri point of view, the conversations that we've had with council and everything that we do is co-everything. So co-management, co-governance, co-everything. And what we're talking about here is a mechanism that might be able to achieve that. We haven't landed on whether a district-wide or breaking it up into rural, urban is the best way forward. We haven't landed on that as an iwi, so we won't make any comment in that space. The one point, or the two other points that we wanted to make was that whatever we land on and whatever mechanism that we get here cannot usurp the mana of each iwi in Te Tairāwhiti. That's a non-negotiable. And so those that represent or that are elected as members on the Māori ward need to be clear about that. The last is that a tāmanihiri view of the world is that a skill-based approach is always best. So we need to attract the best talent, and we need to attract the best people to represent the views of our rohe. And that includes the whole of Te Tairāwhiti. So as Penny says, we have some really good talent in the region. We are confident that we have more than enough people who can do a really good job here in this space. And I suppose the last point, just to round off, is just want to acknowledge the council. Ngāi Manihiri have a really strong relationship with the Gisborne District Council, and just want to acknowledge the Mayor, Nadine and James and the team around the small steps and the progress that we have been making so far, and we're looking to this opportunity as a big step change for the region. So kia ora.
Kia ora, Doug. Appreciate those observations. So Manu is the next appellant to speak, and kia ora, Manu. You've been sitting on the sideline there for a while. We're a little bit behind time, but it's like that around the rest of the motu, so don't worry about it. No, it's where we're at. So look, commissioners, if you go to page 53, just bear with. And you've seen the process, Manu, you're pretty comfortable? Perfect. We're in your hands for your observations.
Kia ora, tēnā tātou, huri au Ngāti Pukenga, Ngāti Haua, engari noho aurunga te whenua o tōku hoa i raro te maru o Hikurangi Maunga. I'm a Māori resident and a rural resident. Our whānau live about 2 hours north of the city. Before that, we lived in the city. About 7 years we've been up the coast. I've participated in a number of representation reviews, both as a resident and as an elected representative for a few years as a councillor. And maybe a little disclaimer with this submission, I've got no interest in ever being an elected representative again, so I'm not trying to set up a situation that would give me any favourable futures in that regard. I guess for 20 years as a resident, and then as a councillor, and then as a resident again, I've seen how rates and rules set by the council have been disproportionately influenced by what I'd call the wealthy rural lobbyists, and how those rules and rate settings have affected low-income households, both in the city and in rural communities. And just a couple of examples of that. One would be the loading of as much as possible onto the Universal Annual General Charges, UAGC, that again disproportionately sort of loads rates burden onto individual properties rather than where the perhaps capital value might land otherwise. And another being the use of targeted rates, so trying to sort of very user pays approach rather than again allowing those who can best afford to contribute to do so. And I think those are probably the two most egregious examples that I can think of. I believe that rural and urban residents who are not on the Māori roll would get most effective and fair representation by being elected, being able to elect all 8 councillors on that general ward. I don't think that the proposal as it stands is going to be fair and effective for those who aren't on the Māori roll, both non-Māori and Māori. I share Commissioner Bigham's concerns, or what she was alluding to perhaps, around the ability of STV to provide proper representation in a rural ward that has only 2 elected representatives. I think STV works best when there's a large number of both candidates and seats to be elected to. So I do think that it's a bit challenging having an STV system for only 2 seats. I think whole of district voting gives far more choice, especially for people who aren't on the Māori roll, obviously. And I agree with Stacey and Penny that Māori are disenfranchised by this current proposal in relation to that truncated representation, where we'd only have 2 representatives covering something like 8,000 square kilometres of the region. And I've seen, I guess, firsthand how difficult it is for those rural councillors to get around, in the way that when we have particular wards, while the theory is that we represent the whole region and the interests of the region, inevitably we or elected representatives have tended to represent the interests of those who are actually electing them. And so I think that the best system would be one where every resident is represented by every representative around the council table, as much as possible. In this case, very supportive of the Māori wards, but I think the general ward as one ward is the best way to achieve that. City residents can and have and will vote for good rural representatives. I think everybody in the city appreciates the contribution that the rural communities make to the vibrancy and sustainability of the city, and vice versa. I think rural residents will vote for good city representatives, and may end up with all rural representatives if there are no good candidates from the city. So I think the other point to make is that the initial proposal was based on sound rationale from staff, and was supported by councillors, or a good proportion of councillors, and the majority of councillors in that initial round. In the end, the rural farming lobby put a lot of pressure on the mayor particularly, and it was her casting vote that swung the decision. And they're very organised and good on them, but I think that being well organised, and it's great to hear iwi leaders and organisations committed to running good campaigns in the future and in organising voters. But to date, those interest groups that have been well organised have had a strong voice in council, and I think a disproportionate one, which doesn't serve democracy well. So just says, I think the staff well argued the case for one general ward, and ultimately the slim majority of councillors overturned that recommendation and voted for something different. But the rationale and justification for that proposal still stands. And ultimately politics is politics, and councillors will be influenced as they are. But the soundness of the proposal as it stood, I think, is robust. And I guess the other point too is that if rural lobbyists, or if the farming lobby was worried about rural representation, I would have thought they should have argued strongly for strong community boards. And I'm an advocate for that. I think community boards would have been a good option, particularly if they're well empowered, and there's a lot of discretion about how much influence and decision-making power they can have. That's never really been considered seriously, I don't think, in our region. We haven't seen good models of it. We've never had it here. And so it's sort of like, well, we don't really understand them, so we're not going to consider them. And I don't think, you guys are going to make that call at this stage. It wasn't in the initial proposal. But I would love to see one day that we do get community boards that have an opportunity for more elected representatives, more participation by communities at a really sort of local level. I think representative democracy has big problems with it, and we're wrestling with some of those in these considerations, and getting to a more deliberative participatory process is where the country really needs to go. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of the review of local government in that regard. We could have had over 20 elected representatives, and the rural communities would have been well accounted for in that structure. So yeah, ultimately, I think it's just time that we had a united region where these artificial divisions between rural and urban residents get put to rest. It's been an ongoing tension within council. Sometimes that's a healthy tension, but often it's an unhealthy, toxic tension that would be really good to move beyond. And I think that the single ward, the general ward, allows us to do that at last. And every resident will have the opportunity to elect every representative, and I'd implore you to make that sort of decision. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Manu. Thanks for those observations. I'll just check in with commissioners. Any specific questions? Commissioner Bigham.
Tēnā koe Manu, nau te mahi kia koe. You talked about, in your lived experience as an elected member, the challenges you saw that rural councillors face to get around the rohe. Can you speak to some of those a bit more comprehensively? What were the challenges, and how were they overcome, and if so, how were they overcome?
I think one of the other commissioners alluded to the challenges with roading in the region, and there's physical challenges of getting around, and sort of at a decision-making level, we've seen rural roads struggle to be maintained, even with the strong rural lobby that we've had. But ultimately, we've got we live 2 hours north. My representative in the current ward lives south of Tolaga Bay, so closer to Gisborne City. I've never seen her at anything close to our community. And so it's those sort of challenges, I guess. And, they do their best to get out and about, but ultimately rural issues have been left to rural councillors. And so city councillors very rarely take an interest in rural issues, in my experience. Even, I was a city elected representative, and I struggled to get out to the rural areas. I suspect that will continue, so that, it's a big area. We've got a small population. Technology is improving so that we don't need to get around in the same way, and people can get hold of council to get stuff fixed. And people shouldn't need a councillor to come out and see a pothole or a culvert that needs replacing to get action on it. And I think, as some of the other submitters alluded to, there's a good relationship now between communities and council services at that level. But ultimately, given the geography, the idea that 2 representatives are going to be able to get around the region is straining reality quite a lot, and we've just got to find better ways of, as I say, community boards would have been a better way of getting that local level decision making and representation much more effectively than trying to cover the whole region. So I don't think that 8 representatives in the general ward are going to solve that particular issue. I think there's going to need to be other solutions for how we improve the access to the representatives, regardless of where they're based. But the idea of having all elected representatives, knowing that they've all got to take your view into account rather than just the 1 or 2 that are trying to cover the whole rural area, is appealing to me.
Tina koe. Can I just ask another question, Brendan? Sure. In terms, Manu, of the your support for the 1 general ward idea, you talked about rural people maybe voting for town people and town people maybe voting for rural people. Would the disproportionate, no, I'll rephrase that. Is it a concern to you? Do you think that's highly likely, or is there a concern that under the STV model, all of those representatives may end up coming from town, or are there any issues around that for you, or you think that's highly unlikely?
I think it's highly unlikely, and the calibre of rural candidates to date has been high, and as Penny and others have said, there's going to be more work done on that. And some of those, to their credit, rural representatives have been very astute and hardworking individuals, as have many in the city. So I think it's a good opportunity to find the best people from the whole region.
Ka pai, kia ora.
Can I just get a sense in the right of reply around what is currently in place in relation to community committees? So can I just explain this a little bit? Manu, you made the comment about a rural lobby, and I'm curious to understand whether that rural lobby is via any sort of an organisation, or is it a bunch of people that got together? So in the right of reply, I'm keen to understand what else is in place. Obviously no community boards, we know that. How else is the council engaging with communities? Because I've not heard anything today around what else is available. Bear with me, I've got to shut the door. What else is available in terms of connectivity? And I'm prompted by your comment, Manu, around rural lobby, and I just would like to understand what structures. Manu, you might have a comment.
I think organisations like Federated Farmers have been very supportive of what I'd call the rural lobby. So whether they're lending money or policy advice and things to that, or just sort of they've got a good infrastructure of members and communication between the members to make sure that they're well organised and make not only written submissions but turn up in force to council meetings. And I know that the pressure that you can feel as an elected representative when the room's full of one particular group.
Yep, got it. Okay, all right. So I'll just leave that one.
Brendan, can I just add? Can I just add to that your a request for further information? Could I ask the council to address, when I asked about connections between councillors and residents, regardless of what is, and she talked about how council helps councillors get out to the community. If I haven't got a car or a computer, never mind an internet connection, what kinds of ways is the council helping if I want to contact a councillor? Right. And discuss, not the pothole, I agree with Manu on that one, but I want to discuss some issue that's coming up. What if anything is the council doing in that area via their services or planning?
Right, yeah, okay. All right, now, look, so we've received the two individuals that chose to appeal and speak. We've heard a variety of observations. The commissioners have asked questions which they now leave for council to cogitate over and prepare for a right of reply. I think we'd agree that we all need a little break. Just let me check the time. We were due to, what were we due to do? We were due to finish at 10. We're only half an hour behind. It's not too bad. So Mayor Stoltz, just checking in with you, is half an hour long enough for preparation for your right of reply?
Yes, so I just wanted to check, there were some questions in regards to the rural lobby, some questions in regards to services offered to residents that might not have access to, say, fuel or internet. What else did I miss? Because I've just made those two. The other questions, Sue, you asked earlier, and you did say that it doesn't need to be in the right of reply. It can just be emailed. I can't remember.
Yeah, okay.
James, well, I'll talk to James and just catch up. But yes, I would say half an hour is more than enough. So we'll be ready just for a short right of reply at 11.
Yeah, so just before we go, Linda, you'll find has got a good record of what we've asked. And no doubt, just looking for a nod from you, Linda, you'll email that through to, where's James gone? There he is over there, through to James. So that'll all happen in the background. So don't stress on that. We'll adjourn now. Oh, hold on. Just before we do, out of respect, Tama, you've been there all the way through, and they're the only. Oh, wait on. There's two. Mora Brown as well. So I just, to be respectful, need to make sure I'm not missing anybody because you're hanging there for the long haul. Are you? So first of all, Tama, are you okay?
Kate White, Stacey said everything we needed to say.
Thank you. And Moira?
Aye, just Stacey said what we needed to say.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Right, let's adjourn. Penny will give us the detail about how that happens. And we'll reconvene at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, so while we take our break, the live stream will continue running. If anyone wants to leave the meeting, feel free to do that. If you want to come back, you just do that the same way that you did at the beginning of the day. Otherwise, if you're going to hang in there, if you can pop yourselves on mute and switch off your camera, that would be much appreciated. And we'll see you back at 11.
Brendan, just before we do, there's a question from Selwyn in the chat, if you haven't seen it yet.
Well, this technology is pushing us to the limits here. What have we got?
I've seen that question, Benita, and I'm working on an answer.
Ka pai, kia ora.
Okay, and for commissioners, we'll do a quick ring in, okay? Right, we're adjourned.
Kia ora.
Of course.
Right, how are we going there, Penny?
I think we're pretty well on track. I'll just check. I'll just bring Stacey back in. So that's everyone that's in our attendees list from the iwi partners. So
perfect. Okay, so welcome back. We'll reconvene and we'll pass back to you, Mayor Stoltz.
Kia ora, and thank you for the opportunity just to touch on some issues that were raised throughout the hearing and that I can give some clarity around. So the first issue was in Manu's submission about which you also raised, Brendan, around the rural lobby or lobbying happening. So for myself as mayor, obviously we are lobbied all the time. So hand on heart, I can say for this proposal, I was lobbied the most going to Ruatoria to speak on Radio Ngāti Piro, talking to some locals there, where people would stop and say, hey, Mayor, we don't take our local councillor away, or we like that there's someone that can speak on our behalf in our region. Just 2 weeks ago, I went up to Tokomaru Bay to open a playground there. Same kōrero, locals saying, we really appreciate having a local voice or someone with that knows about State Highway 35 or knows about the conditions of State Highway 2. So for me, going back to this process, you can see that right from the beginning, as mayor, I have seen the value that some of that rural voice bring, and that's reflected in how I voted right from the beginning. Even before, when we had our initial proposal, I was one of the councillors that said, I do see value because of the feedback I hear going up the coast or going to Matawai. And so to me, I have consistently seen that throughout the process. So it wasn't that there was an initial proposal and then Federated Farmers bombed me with emails or tried to get undue attention from councillors that then changed votes. So I just wanted to clarify that. And like I say, I get lobbied quite often. Like I communicate with Manu in regards to this as well, where he would bring his opinion across, or I would say, this is the reason I did that. So I just wanted to clarify that that there was not undue influence from anyone like Fed Farmers or a rural community group. What happened is that we put out our initial consultation, initial proposal, which had the 2 at-large wards. What then happened is that we received 1,100 submissions, and we listened to a whole day of submissions, which were from rural people saying we would really appreciate if we can get some type of rural representation. So I just wanted to clarify that. And also from our submissions to you at the end, you can see that the rural community or the community that want at-large voting can also pull themselves together. If you see the pro forma cards that were sent out, and some just had a tick box exercise. So I do think lobbying happened from both sides, but it is unfair and not true to say that I was unduly lobbied by a rural group or by Fed Farmers, because that's just not true. Then I'm going to move on to our next question, which is a question from Sue. So Sue, I hope I can answer it by saying how we support and make sure people have access to our services in a region which is geographically large and not everyone living in the city. So if you take a look at data for Gisborne District Council, you can see that it points to high engagement because we have a relatively high voter turnout as well. So we do see our community engaging with council. But as always, we strive to do better, and this is part of the process where we try to make sure all voices are heard, and what we're doing, we do better. So Sue, the stuff that we do at this stage to support our rural councillors, to support our rural community, and also our community just to have contact with their councillors. We have a clear engagement strategy at council. We make sure we have township meetings up north to our west that would probably happen twice a year, where each of those townships can talk to us in a more formal setting about their township plans and their aspirations for their smaller townships. And that is not just those two exclusive meetings that happen. Sometimes informal meetings are called where a councillor might call the mayor and say, hey, we want to discuss the roading issue at Waipiro Bay. Can we please call a meeting? So that happens as well. Then I've mentioned it earlier, we have liaison officers like Lillian, who is in Tokumaru Bay, who support our officers who have an office in Te Puia. So there's also that on the ground, someone that lives in the community and can feed back. Then another presence we have, which is a strong presence, is our civil defence presence. We have to rely on that link as well in our smaller communities to feed back to council what is needed, what support is needed. And it's not always just when we have to evacuate people. It is also in these COVID times, was it very important for us, for our community to have those trusted members that they can feed back to. And then just another option that we take, or another, we have what we call a road show. So we will travel up the coast and we advertise it on Facebook, on our council newsletter, saying to our community, we are traveling up the coast with IRD, with MSD, with Te Puni Kokiri, with Sport Gisborne Tairāwhiti, and different services that will be pulled together in to reach out to our community. So like I'm saying, we are doing a lot. And then sitting alongside that, and I'm sure Selwyn will attest to this as well, we do have good working relationships with our iwi partners. We have with, I'm just going to use Selwyn as an example here, because Selwyn is the co-chair of Rautipu Raora with MES, and we also have the joint management agreement with Ngāti Porou. So we do meet regularly, and often through those channels, messaging will get to us from our iwi partners. So we try to have as many channels open where our community can communicate with us if it's not possible to travel to town, or they might have interrupted internet connections. And like I say, there's always room for improvement. I'm not saying this, we are doing everything right, or we are reaching all the right people, but you cannot fault us for effort. We are trying to reach out and make sure we get some connections. And we're always open to hear from our community if we are missing some engagement opportunities, or we try to go to community events. So we do try to, if there is a function out at Muriwai School, sometimes they will send an email to us saying, this is happening, so please can council candidates come here. So this is just in election times as well. So we do have a wide web of reaching out and trying to pull in our community. But like I say, we're always trying to do better, because I would be the first person to say that lots of local government processes are clunky, not easy to navigate, and we sometimes tick boxes that we have to do in order to comply, but which might not be our community's first choice to communicate. So we're trying our best, but as a council, and as a new council since 2019, I hope the message has been clear to our community that we are making these incremental step changes in order for us to be a representative council, to make sure we have voices around the table which bring a different view, different solutions to our problems, to make sure everyone is heard. So I hope I've covered that off, Sue. And then last but not least, I am just going to wrap up my right of reply with saying, if you take a look at our initial proposal, which we had, and you take a look, it is in your pack about the community consultation we then had and the feedback we have received. You can see that there has been clear community support for either our initial proposal and a near split then for including rural wards. So our community have spoken to us. So after our initial proposal was passed, we received 1,100 submissions saying we do not support with that. And councillors then had the hearing, listened, and that then changed to our final proposal. So I want to say we tried to work with our community. I hope today you could have seen that our intentions are there to walk alongside our community, to try and walk alongside our iwi partners to get the best possible outcome, not for the council, but for the voters in Te Tai Rāwhiti, because at the end of the day, we are just their voice on the ground. So I want to thank you for the opportunity that I had to show you the process we followed, to show you the initial proposal, the submissions we received, how council then got to the final proposal, to try and have some of that rural voice that our community told us they really find valuable and would like to retain, that we tried in our proposal with trying to stick within our rules and our government regulations to make sure that rural lived experience is also brought to our discussions around the table. So thank you very much to listening to us today. If you have any other questions or queries, please feel free to reach out to us via email if you think about something after we have closed our hui today. But I just want to also acknowledge our iwi partners here today. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being part of this process. I really appreciate it.
Kia ora, that's well summarised, Ms. Stoltz. Thanks so much for that summary. So look, the process is the process. We've now got a job to do in terms of deliberations and considering all that's been placed in front of us as commissioners. So for the record, we have to have our decision known or made known by the 10th of April. That's not far away. And as you acknowledged earlier on, there's quite a lot occurring at the moment. I would acknowledge that holding these hearings virtually do make it more challenging. So not being able to sit kanohi, kindi kanohi, face to face, talking to each other is a challenge. But I appreciate everybody's effort in the way we've engaged today. To you, Nadine, can I just make the acknowledgement that your team in the background preparing for today, if our thanks could go back. I know James is a key player in that role, and I'm sure there are others that I've got no knowledge of, but if you could pass back thanks to the team that worked with our team to make it all happen. Digitally today, it's been very good. In fact, it's been fantastic. I'll say that on some occasions we can't even see who we're talking to, but today's been crystal clear, and that makes it a heck of a lot easier. So I do want to just conclude with those acknowledgements. And just in terms of protocol, we have got a closing karakia, but I'd like to check in to make sure we're not offending anybody. If there's any protocols that would be anticipated from your side, or are you, James, give us a bit of guidance here?
I think I'll hand it over to Selwyn after me. I wanted to say thank you, Brendan. Right. You did an excellent job chairing this discussion, and it wasn't quite what I expected, but it's been a really pleasant conversation for me this morning. And thank you to all of the other staff who have come in and helped make this happen. And Bonita, just to respond to what you mentioned earlier, the Urupa's Whakore Kore Te Kai, and very familiar with Lee Martel, who's known in our community as Lee Ping. Mohoi is across the road from my house in Manituki. So tēnā te mihi atu ki a koe.
You mihi te hu, Māku.
Will do. And I think what I will send through a written summary of our points, so I'm not going to labour on any further, but I do want to acknowledge also Selwyn for hanging in there to the end alongside myself. Great to have the iwi voice in this conversation together. So, kei a koe Selwyn.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Stacey. Selwyn. You'll find the button eventually, Selwyn. We're all challenged by it. Get rid of that mute button.
All right, pehe tēnei. Koe anō mihi ana kia tātou. I runga i te kaupapa nāna tātou I whakahuihui I tēnei ata. E tautoko I o kororo rihet I ngā kaupapa e mahitahi nei ngā iwi o te tairāwhiti e te kaunihera. Kaore hā I roto I te rautipu rauora. Kei te pērā tunu ngā whakahaere. Etahi taima, kāre I te orite o tātou whakaro, koe no ko te mea nui kei te kōrero rero tātou kia tātou. And yeah, I'd just like to echo Brendan, your insights to this Zoom. Yeah, could see everybody, could hear everybody. So the internet and IT in the Tairāwhiti must be the best in the country. So, yeah, thank you. Kia ora.
So, Benita, it might be appropriate that we collectively close with our karakia. I think that's a good fit. That feels right.
E te pai o mina.
Where you go? Where you go?
Oh,
no. Where you go?
Kia ora rā, tina rā tātou I te whānau. Ko tā tātou karakia whakamutunga, tai hoa, māku e tiki. Because one time I got it wrong and my commissioners were highly, highly disgusted with me. So let's not repeat that today. Oh, okay, whea. Now I've got papers all over the place. Tina rā anō tātou, ko te karakia whakamutunga mō tēnei rōpū o te kumihana ko unuhia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia I te uru tapanui, kia wātea, kia māma, te tinana, te wairua I te aratakatū. Koia rā I rongo, whakairi ake ki runga, kia wātea, ai rā kua wātea, rere hau, pai mariri. Tēnā rā tātou.
Pai mariri. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks a lot for your time.
Kia ora, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Yeah.